You're listening to the Vol Basketball Fever Podcast, your source for news, discussion, and debates about the Vols and Lady Vols basketball programs. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the Lady Vol Basketball Fever Podcast. I'm Nathanael Rutherford, joined this time by special guest Cora Hall of Knox News. She covers Tennessee women's athletics for Knox News. Had her on the show before. First time she's doing a video podcast with me, though. So, Cora, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This is always a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a little bit since we've had you on. Quite a bit's happened since we last had you on the show here, but really only good news for Tennessee and the Lady Vols, because Lady Vols are rolling right now. They are just coming off another nice, impressive SEC victory, this time on the road against Ole Miss, a game where they just like, I guess just like the Texas A&M really jumped out into a more dominant role later on. There wasn't, the opening quarter wasn't the most dominant, but the second quarter, third quarter, Lady Vols really jumped out to the lead by halftime, ran away with it, and we're able to kind of cruise. It was a little, I guess, kind of messy down the stretch there, but Tennessee still pulled off a 12-point victory. And you also got to give credit to Ole Miss. They're a good team, a solid team, a team that came into that game only 13-1 on the year. So just like Tennessee, only one loss. But that was also a game where I saw different crowd shots from the Ole Miss arena, Cora, and it seemed very close to being a Tennessee home game. So before we really get into diving into the game itself, I mean, I just want to give props and credit to Lady Vol fans, because we always, I've always talked about with basketball, with football, Vol fans get a lot of notoriety, especially in the men's sports. But I want to give a lot of credit and a lot of praise to Lady Vol fans, because they to me are probably the most passionate fan base I've ever seen. They care a lot about this program, a lot about this team, and boy, it showed on Sunday when you're in Oxford, and it looks like it's almost a home game in Knoxville with how much orange was in the stands there.
I think the other piece of that too is there's Lady Vol fans all over the country, just because of how long this program has done well and the legacy that was built here. People go to college here and then they move somewhere else, but they stay Lady Vol fans. Because I remember talking to Terry Holder at Orange Mountain Designs for the NIL story I wrote, and she was talking about all the different places she ships, merch. So they're everywhere, even if they don't need to travel. Like if that's the one game and you're in Mississippi, you're like, hey, I'm going to go. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. We'll how they circle back to that NIL piece, because that was one of the ones I was going to bring up you had written recently. But to get back to the actual game here, Lady Vols again win 70-58, and that continues just a win streak for them. They're now 4-0 in SEC play. And Cora, as of us recording this, we're doing this on a Monday night here. Lady Vols earlier on Monday were voted into the top 5 of the AP poll for the first time in 7 years. It was the first time since that 2015-2016 season, earlier on that year, that the Lady Vols have been into the top 5 of the AP poll. And I think that it's very important. It's one thing when you look back at Lady Vols or top 5, back in the day, like they were always consistently top 5. This has been something they haven't done in a while. And I think, to me, before we kind of talk about some of the players and the play of the team, I don't think it can be understated or overstated, I guess, whatever the right word is there, how important it is to see that number next to the Lady Vol name, and to see them get back to me, what I said on Twitter on Monday, back into the company that they're supposed to be in, like where they belong, where the Lady Vol brand is supposed to be. I think it can't be stated enough how important it is to see that and to be recognized as, hey, they're back where they belong. How long do they stay there? We'll see. I think they can stay there for a lot longer, very long time this season, because I think they're just a really good team this year. But I don't think it can be said enough, like how big of a deal it is that this is finally the case. It's been the first time in too long that this program has been out of that kind of upper echelon, that elite category in women's basketball.
Yeah, I think it's also nice for Kelly to get kind of that recognition of what she's been building here, because this doesn't happen overnight. Obviously, it took 3 seasons for this to happen, and recruiting and, new assistant coaches and all this. But, from what I've heard and everyone I've talked to, it's very intentional. Like, she is building something, and she's had so much experience as a head coach and building programs that she was ready for it. And I think that's the other important piece is like right place, right time for Kelly.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. It's a lot about the recognition for her too, because this is her third year, and a lot of people had questions. Hey, she obviously has Lady Vols pedigree background. She played for Pat Summitt, so did Holly Warlick, and that didn't go the way that people hoped it would. But Kelly Harper had head coaching experience before, but kind of up and down a little bit. She did, I think, had a lot of success. I thought she was a good fit, and I thought she could have success, but you never know. There's a lot of times you look on paper and a head coach seems like they're going to be a great fit at a school, and they don't end up being a great fit at a school. So I thought on paper she made a lot of sense, and I'm very glad to see that it's being, she's getting justification. As you said, she's getting recognition. She's already been in a lot of talk about coach of the year candidates and stuff, and I think that she is very, very deserving of that. But to go now to court and to talk about some of these players and talk about some of the play of the Lady Vols, Cora, it's nice to see Rae Burrell back. I think, she's still, you can tell, is knocking off the rust. She's still not really put up a whole lot of points in any game she's been back. But I think we've seen the offense take a step forward. And I think you said this during the game, during the Ole Miss game, actually on Sunday, that even she's out there, even if she's not scoring, she's opening up opportunities for other players. The 3 games that she's been back for the Lady Vols, and granted, it's not been the most efficient of offensive outputs in those games, but all 3 games that she's really been back and has played, minutes in, the Lady Vols have eclipsed 70 points. They scored 70 against Arkansas, they scored 73 against A&M, and they scored 70 against Ole Miss. Again, that's not like a super high total, but it's more than what the Lady Vols had done in a lot of high major contests before Rae Burrell came back. So feel free to expound upon it. But I think this return for Rae Burrell, she's really only starting to kind of scratch the surface of what she's going to be able to do. And that, I think, if you're an opponent for Lady Vols, that has to scare you, because they already look like a pretty different team these last 3 games on offense with her out there. Now, if she starts getting her shot back and starts feeling more in rhythm and more, getting in the groove back, that's dangerous. That to me, this team's ceiling is still not been reached yet.
Yeah, and I want to preface what I say by I recognize that Rae Burrell is a WNBA future prospect, and she is an incredible player. But I don't want the team without her to not get their credit for learning to change their basically entire offense on the fly and not lose except to Stanford. I mean, that's so impressive to me. They really figured it out, and it was cool to watch. They adapted. They made Tamari Key their central piece of their offense, and that has been incredibly valuable to them. But Rae coming back is a huge plus for that, because I said this in my my AP poll column. I was like, Tennessee worked its way into a top 10 team, and now they're adding back their WNBA draft pick. That's a big deal. So for the other teammates, I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. But Rae does stretch the floor because she can shoot. She can just spot up and shoot, and she doesn't need to necessarily be attacking the paint every time yet. But her presence on the floor is another offensive threat, and her playing adds more depth. That is such an important part for this, because now you've got she's coming off the bench right now, so she's depth, and when she's eventually probably starts again, then you're gonna have Tess Darby coming off the bench, Sarah Puckett, Brooklyn Miles, Kean Green. That is a deep bench. And so I think that's the other piece that's so important that they fought through, is not having that depth, really, because you're trying to get your freshmen up to speed. And now they have an insane amount of depth, in my opinion.
Yeah, you make a good point that, obviously her teammates clearly deserve a lot of attention and a lot of credit, like you said, but that's a really important part going into when you get to February and March. They've already learned the lessons early this year of how to play when your star player either isn't playing or is having an off night. So if you get to some key pivotal games in March and whatnot, whether it's SEC tournament or NCAA tournament, and Jordan Horston's shot isn't falling, or Tamari's shot isn't falling, or Rae's shot's not falling, this team already knows, hey, we can win games without having to rely on this player. You see a lot of times superstar teams, they have 1 or 2 superstars. If one of those or both those players, their shots aren't falling or they're not playing up to expectation, the team struggles because they've come to rely on that player. This team, you guess Jordan Horston, I think, has stepped up huge, but she also had games where she wasn't, top of her game where her shots were all falling, and Lady Vols still found ways to win mostly because of that defense. I mean, we'll talk a little bit more kind of about Tamari Key specifically in a second, but man, Cora, this defense is just, it's suffocating, man. I have yet to see an offense this year. Maybe Stanford. That's the only one I can really think of that kind of, found something against Tennessee this year. But this Lady Vol defense is like, I was watching the Ole Miss game on Sunday, and they said it was, it goes back to vintage Tennessee, vintage Pat Summitt of defense and rebounding wins games. And her old quote that offense sells tickets, but defense wins championships. And I think this team is built a lot more similarly to the old Pat Summitt teams than a team that I can remember in the past, 5, 6, 7 years. And I think that's where they've built their foundation and they've built their backbone on this defense, and anything they get from offense is kind of a plus. But this defense, I don't know how you can score over 70 against this defense, because it is relentless. And it's not just like 3 or 4 players, it's like the entire team. And I think you may have said it already too, Rae Burrell, all her offense, but she's also a really good defender. I mean, you're not just getting a good offensive piece back with her, you're getting another good defender back with her too. So this defense to me can really carry this team.
Yeah. And, they have the number 1 field goal percentage defense in the country. And, that's partially due to the fact that with their defense, they're forcing teams to take contested shots and they don't give them a lot of open looks, so that's part of it. But also I have seen a few teams shoot really, really badly against Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Like the Alabama game, I saw so many like rim in and out, and I was like, this is like maybe the most comical miss I've seen, like just over and over and over. And I was like, when is one going to roll in for them? But their defense does deserve a lot of credit to their opponent's field goal percentage. But yeah, that part about Rae Burrell's defense, I mean, I just remember watching Shakira Austin like dribble, like, I don't know, almost out to the wing and then try to step back and pull up, and both Tamari and Rae were like closing down on her. So I'm like, that's not what anyone wants to be doing. And Rae has great length and height. So with her and Jordan Horston being that tall and having that wingspan, them on defense guarding other smaller SEC guards is just going to be a nightmare. And South Florida's coach said this earlier about Jordan Horston. Just her length makes her an awful matchup for so many teams, because she's a guard, she's a point guard, and she's matching up with players who are like Jordan Walker's size, 5'8", 5'10". So it's like anytime she's going to have an advantage.
It's impressive to me every time I watch, Jordan Horston go out there, because she'll go fight for rebound. I'm like, my goodness, she has such long arms and can jump really well. Like she looks like a forward out there when she goes and fights rebounds. Like it's just, this team is just, they're so athletically gifted, and just defensively, like even the young players, like you look at Brooklyn Miles, like she's been known for her defense. You look at even, like I said, just some of the other younger players who are role players and how much their defense is already starting to improve. Even the players who are supposed to be more offensive minded, like Tess Darby, like she's not bad on defense either. I do want to bring her up because I thought the game against Ole Miss, that was probably her best game so far in terms of, against the competition she was going up against and the way she played. 25 minutes, she was 3 of 6 from 3, 4 of 4 from the free throw line, finished with 13 points, 4 boards, and an assist in that game. No turnovers or anything like that. 2 steals. That to me, that's scary. If Tess Darby can get going, if she has found her more consistent shot, because she's already the main 3-point threat for Lady Vols. She has the most made 3-pointers on the team, but her efficiency has been, it's been hit or miss there. She's had some really good games. She's had some games where like, okay, she missed more shots than she should have, or here or there. But if she's really starting to find her rhythm, if she's going to turn into a more consistent, dangerous 3-point threat, that's scary to me too, because she was 2 of 5 against A&M, 3 of 6 against Ole Miss. So again, she's been better here in SEC plays. 3 of 8 against Alabama, not too bad. Only took 1 shot against Ole Miss. Excuse me, those are her overall shooting percentages. Her 3, not too far behind that though. 2 of 4 from A&M, 3 of 7 against Alabama, and 3 of 6. So actually even better than I said. But to me, like she's come on more lately. She was kind of hit or miss there in the non-conference. SEC play, she's found more of a rhythm and more of a groove. And I think this freshman class, I've said it before, it's just really impressive to me. They're not a freshman class you've had to start and you've had to play like a bunch of minutes like you've had in years past for the Lady Vols. Tess Darby demands minutes. Like she's good enough to keep playing. Same thing with Sarah Puckett. So I think to me, Tess Darby, if she's found her 3-point shot, look out, because that's again, just like with bringing Rae Burrell in, that's going to open up this offense even more. That's an area that the Lady Vols have really missed. They've had the post presence, but if Tamari Key has someone who she gets it down the post and doesn't have an option, she can pass it back out to Darby and she can hit a three. That to me, that's a dimension the Lady Vols haven't had in a lot of this season. And if Tess is going to be more consistent in SEC play, that's great news for the Lady Vols.
Yeah, Tess has been really nice just because, she's hitting shots at good times. Like her 3-pointers come at very important times in the game. And when teams realize, okay, she's going to make it probably if you give her an open shot, then that stretches the floor. And, Jordan Walker has done the same, I think, done really well to hit big threes at certain moments. So, just those two getting more offense going is really important because, Jordan Walker's proved, I'm going to put up 17 points tonight because maybe Jordan Horston or Alexis Dye's shots aren't falling. And she's been so quietly consistent. I think her and Tess both have been really quietly consistent and really important to this team, even if they don't get a lot of the attention. And I think the other thing with Tess is she's got pretty good positioning on the floor, because I just think of, there's been a lot of really good assists to her, but she gets herself in a good position. She knows where she wants to shoot. She's going to take the good shot. She's not going to take a shot if it's not on for her. So I think that's also been important, because shot selection when you're a 3-point shooter is important. You can't just be throwing up threes all the time. You have to be, in the right spot, the right time. And she does a really good job of that. So I think, her having to start, Rae, after Rae got hurt, has been good for her, because last season, I don't imagine she got a ton of minutes as a freshman. So just her getting more experience in game shots and making threes in games is really important.
Well, we kind of teased it earlier and said we'd talk a little bit more about Tamari Key specifically, because there's a reason to want to. You mentioned this on Twitter, and I was kind of taken aback by it. So I'll kind of let you lead this one, Cora. But Tamari deserves, let's just say she deserves more national attention than she's getting, which is ridiculous when you look at her stat line, you look at her play, because she leads the nation in blocks. She's going to, in my opinion, set the career record for blocks at Tennessee, maybe by the end of this year, because she's already got like 10 or 20 something blocks. And the career record is Candace Parker with 275. And Tamari's she got 11 in one game. She got 10 in one game. She now has like the second, third, and fourth most blocks in a game in a Tennessee career. And this is her third year. And it's her third year in a counting 2 COVID shortened seasons, basically. So what she's been able to do in her career is impressive. What she's doing this year specifically is really impressive. I'll let you kind of handle it, because I was taken aback, but she's not getting the recognition she deserves. She's not on a certain watch list that she should be on.
Yeah, they released the midseason Win Award watch list, and there's 25 players, 5 centers, and none of them were Tamari Key, which was very interesting to me, because if you're going to have 5 centers on that list, I really truly believe that Tamari Key belongs on there. I would assume it's probably because she's not averaging as many points as the other centers. However, the Wooden Awards list, I looked at the criteria because I was like, is it just because of her offense? But it says, players have to be excellent on offense and defense. And I think she is the most dominant center defensively right now in the country. I mean, we saw her match up directly with Elizabeth Kitley in December, and Elizabeth Kitley didn't score any of her 4 points while Tamari was on the court. So riddle me that is kind of my question, when we clearly saw one of the centers on the list be just shut out by Tamari. And I don't think people realize how good she is on defense. You can have those games where you look at it, like, okay, she had 11 blocks. That's crazy. But even on games when she doesn't have 11 blocks, she probably had 4 or 5 shots she had that got altered because she's so tall. When they are able to sit her in the paint, no one's driving in the lane like they would if she wasn't. So she's eliminating offensive opportunities for the team just by standing on the court, let alone the fact that she is so good with her positioning now. She is so aware of her positioning on the court, of where other players are going, where the other players are coming backdoor. and she can track so well that even if she's a little bit out of position, she has gotten a lot of blocks. When she started a tiny bit out of position, adjusted on her way over, clean block. And that is a huge difference from last year. Like I think someone asked her after the 11 block game, what's been the difference this season or something like that about, and she was like, not fouling. And that's truly it, because, when I talked with Joy about Tamari's development earlier in the season, Joy was like, that was just an area that needed discipline. And it, whatever they did in practice, it's working. So I've been extremely impressed by, in her offense. I think she was 4 for 4 against Texas A&M. She's gotten those moves. She's pulling them out. She's done so well offensively that she gotten 7 double doubles this season, 1 triple double. That was the other thing. I was like, she's one of 14, 15 players that have a triple double this season, which is crazy that there's that many, but she's the only center. So I don't know. It just didn't make sense to me. I was just like, I don't know why she's not on that list if you have 5 centers. No offense to the other ones. They're all great players, but if you're going to put 5 centers on that list, I don't think you can really leave Tamari Key off that.
No, I agree with you, because like you said, it's more than just the statistical part of it, because it's not just the blocks per game and all that. But even that, like statistically, that's impressive. Like that's insane. But like you said, it's the way that she causes people to be afraid to even enter the paint, or she alters shots, or she does things that don't show up in the stat sheet. Because I want to go back to that A&M game. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was looking at the stats to bring it up here. A&M in that game only had 14 points in the paint. And I wonder how many of those 14 came when Tamari wasn't in the game, because I feel like every single time they tried to do anything in the paint when she played 23 minutes in that game, anytime they tried to do anything in the paint when she was in there for those 23 minutes, there was nothing. Like they either got blocked, or they had to pass it back out, or the shot was altered. Like I bet you the vast majority of those 14 points came when Tamari was not in the game, because I don't remember them scoring on her, period, when they tried to do anything in the paint in that game. So yeah, and it's crazy too, because it's not like she's having like some kind of paltry offensive year. She's averaging 10.4 points and almost 9 rebounds a game. Like I am blown away that she's not on the list. And again, that doesn't mean that she won't be on, like, by the time we get to the year end list where it's a semifinalist or whatever. Like I think she'll hopefully be on there by that time. But I think she's just like, her offensive game has taken such a huge step forward this year compared to where she had been the past 2 seasons. Past 2 seasons, you just kind of threw it in there, and she's bigger and taller, and she put a shot up and it'll go in because she's right there at the rim. This year, she's actually developed more of an offensive game, I think, and more of a, I guess, the word developed, a more developed offensive game overall. And like you said, she's not fouling on defense. Her footwork, she's able to close the gap really quickly, and suddenly she's there. Even if she doesn't block your shot, she's, like you mentioned earlier in this podcast, like her and Rae got out there really quickly on somebody on the perimeter. Like, oh crap, what am I going to do now? I don't know. Tamari, to me, it's hard to pick like the most impressive person on this team, but she might, it's her or Jordan Horston. Like I go back and forth, Cora, on which one I think has been most impressive to me this year, but it's her or Jordan Horston, just because Horston stepped up big time when the team needed her when Rae went out. But I mean, both those players have had multiple double doubles. Horston's flirted. I don't remember if she got a triple double. I don't think she did, but she's flirted with one a couple of times. Tamari has obviously gotten one. Like those 2 players have been just phenomenal for this team this year.
Yeah, I would say if you think about this season and could they get through losing Tamari Key? They got through losing Rae Burrell because they used multiple people to replace her, right? Mm-hmm. Multiple people are making up for that offensive production, that defense. But if you take Tamari Key away from this team, they are not 15-1. Absolutely not. She has been the difference for them in situations, in certain games. And obviously she's 6'6", but besides that, like Kean Green's great, but Kean Green isn't 6'6". So you can't replace her. You can't replace what she does for the team defensively, offensively. Like there's so many teams that can't match up with her height wise, so that if she sits on the block and has a little bit of space, like someone can just lob it to her, she'll grab it and just lay it in. So it's like you can't replace a player like that. And the fact that she is owning that and scoring and doing everything she's been doing has been huge. It would take a lot of people to replace her.
That's a really good point. I think that's, to me, a really good way to determine either an MVP or, like you said, who's been most impressive. Is this team where they are, or even close to where they are without this player in the lineup for an extended period of time? And I think you're right. I think this team, if they were without Jordan Horston, but they still had Rae Burrell, I think they would be in a very similar spot to where they are now. But if they were without Tamari Key to the same time they were out without Rae Burrell, you make a very good point. I don't think defensively they could be able to do what they do. I don't even think offensively they could be able to do what they've been able to do so far this year, because of what she does and the way she affects teams' mentality and the way that she affects the way teams attack Tennessee on offense, because they've a lot of teams have had to jack up more threes and settle for more mid-range jumpers than they would like, because of the way Tennessee's been able to defend that paint when Tamari's in there. And like you said, the foul trouble hasn't been as big of a problem this year for Tamari. And part of that, you said, has been her learning and adjusting to what she needs to do. But also, she's gotten a little bit better of a whistle. I think that's part of the thing the past couple of years, is that I think a lot of Lady Vols fans would agree with me that she hasn't gotten, to me, the most fair of whistles, just because she's so much bigger and taller and stronger than a lot of the post players she's going up against. But this year, I think like you said, I think she's gotten smarter and has learned from coaching and everything too, how to move her body and how to not draw or, get as many fouls as would be. Again, I think she's going to have games where she's in foul trouble, which is going to happen when you're a post player in any men's, women's basketball, either one. But Cora, looking ahead here a little bit on the schedule, Lady Vols have a couple ranked opponents coming up. They play at Vanderbilt and Nashville on Thursday, but they also host Kentucky, which is a ranked team, in Knoxville on January 16th on next Sunday. And then they go on the road against a ranked Georgia team next Sunday. So that's, I guess, kind of week break there between Kentucky and Georgia. But again, we've talked multiple times about how this schedule doesn't let up for the Lady Vols. They've already faced some pretty tough teams. I think Ole Miss and Arkansas both are very quality SEC teams this year. And I think A&M, though, not as good as they've been in years past, they're still a quality team. They're still a team that I think will be an NCAA tournament team. It's not getting much easier for Lady Vols, because they have those two games, and they play Auburn, they play Arkansas again, they have Florida, and then it's UConn, and then it's a Missouri team that's suddenly surprisingly, better than I think people were expecting them to be. So, Cora, I don't know. It's going to be tough for the Lady Vols to get to that UConn game without suffering another loss, just because of the way it's the SEC. Just about anybody can beat about anybody. With Missouri can beat South Carolina, just about anybody else can beat about anybody else. I think I would maybe take that bet. If I'm not a big betting person, but if I were to put money on it, I would be tempted to put money on the fact Lady Vols would not lose another game before UConn. But not gonna be easy, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't like to speak these things aloud, because I am a mildly superstitious person when it comes to sports, and I won't be responsible for that. However, I think for them, they want to win championships. They want to win the SEC again. They want to be back at the top, and that requires being on every night, every day, and that's not easy to do. But Kelly is, I don't know what she does, but she has gotten this team so bought in to everything that she is doing. And I think that has been such a huge part of their success, is just they care about each other. Everyone loves each other so much, and they just refuse to lose. They will put everything on the court. And so I think they have a really good chance of that SEC title, especially with Mizzou upsetting South Carolina. But that also shows that that road game in Georgia is going to be tough. Georgia upset NC State on the road. That is not easy to do. That Georgia team is tough. Joni Taylor's a great coach. And so, that should be a game that's going to be one of their harder games. LSU at home is going to be a great matchup. South Carolina on the road, that's going to be a tough one. I have a feeling that's going to be the SEC championship game, basically. But we're looking really far ahead. Vanderbilt is a must win for them. If they want to go for that SEC, they got to put this game away. Kentucky's going to be a really big matchup Sunday. Ryan Howard's a great player. She can change the whole game, and she's probably going to be a number one. I would say if I had to guess, she'd be number one draft pick over Nalissa Smith. But, also Kira Elsie and her associate head coach, Maya Butts, both were on Kelly Harper's team in 98.
Yep.
They are all cut from the same cloth. These are great coaches. So it's not going to be easy, but based on what we've seen, there's a lot of momentum going for them. They are so dialed in, and you can tell how badly they want it. Because like even after the Stanford loss, not shaken. They came in there and they were like, yeah, we lost, but like they knew what they did wrong. And they just felt more determined after that. And Kelly said recently, I think it was last week, she said that after that game, they walked a bit away with confidence that they could play with anybody. And I think in a way that loss was a good thing for them, even though obviously you want to win them all, but that was a good loss for them in my opinion, because it's Stanford first of all. Second of all, there's a lot to take away from that game.
Absolutely right, and I think that's very well said. Like I said, the one loss they have is not a bad loss at all. That's not one it's not gonna detract from your resume when it comes NCAA tournament time. That to me, we're looking way ahead. But that I'm excited thinking about like the seeding possibilities for this Lady Vol team, because if they get to a two, like again, like you said, I'm always a little wary about saying these things because I don't want to put that out there, and all of a sudden if they don't do it, it's on me. Like just think about them getting to a 2 seed, because I don't know if they'll get a 1 seed, but just like even getting to a 2 seed would be something I haven't seen the Lady Vols be in the NCAA tournament in a long time, and that would excite me and get me revved up, for March Madness for the Lady Vols, because I mean this team's built for postseason. We'll see, but I think this team is built for some sort of postseason success. But Cora, I know a lot of Lady Vols fans aren't just fans of Lady Vols; they're big women's basketball fans in general. And I know you, just from seeing you on Twitter and stuff, like you're a very well versed, well educated basketball fan. Like you kind of take in a lot of different stuff for college basketball. Has there been anything in the SEC, outside of Lady Vols that's really stood out to you so far? We're like what 4-ish games into the SEC season. Obviously, we've also had a bunch of different non-conference stuff. Has there been any other kind of non-Tennessee stuff that's really stood out to you here as we're about almost midway through January?
To state the obvious, Leah Boston.
Yeah.
Great player. I mean, she has just completely separated herself from the pack, the way she is playing. I want to say she's had 9 double-doubles in a row, and they're like 18 points, 19 rebounds type double-doubles. Like she's solidly getting a double-double. And she's a huge game changer. The way she plays is so impressive to me. Like I've never seen anything like it. So she is so exciting, so fun to watch. Kim Mulkey has done wonders. And, I know there's some drama after that South Carolina LSU game because of just, things. I'm not going to go into that because that's not really my place. But, Kim Mulkey's done a lot with this team. They are a SEC, in my opinion, they're a contender for an SEC title. They're a really good team. Trying to think other SEC. I mean, obviously the Mizzou game. I think the craziest thing to me is they didn't have Blackwell, their number one player.
Right.
And she's like leading the SEC in points and rebounds, I believe. She was when I last checked. So to have your best player, who is also one of the best players in the SEC, out playing South Carolina with 7 or 8 players and winning is astounding to me. Like that, I'm still upset I can't watch that replay on my ESPN app, because I came out of a Lady Vols game, went to pressers, was not like, I usually don't check other people's Twitter during games because it stresses me out. So once I was finished my first story, I like looked at my notifications and I went on Twitter, and my jaw was like on the ground when I saw the result of that South Carolina Mizzou game. So it's just it reminds me of when I was a kid and I watched Big Ten basketball. And I was a huge Michigan State fan, still am. But Tom Izzo was like a hallowed name in my household. But watching them growing up, they were often, top the rankings. But then you get to conference play, and it's like Big Ten was so good when I was like growing up, and they still are a solid conference overall. But it was like they could be number 1, number 2, going to conference play. drop a game to an unranked team because that's how good the conference was. And you couldn't even be mad because the conference was so good that it was just anybody's. And that's how the women's SEC feels right now. And it's so fun. It's so fun.
You're absolutely right. No, I remember those Big Ten days because that was a lot, you know, when I was really deep into college basketball, when I first started really getting into it was like you said, I remember those times where Tom Izzo would jump out and they'd be top 5 in the country. Then they would lose to a team. You're like, what are they doing with the dread? Like it wasn't because it was a bad team. That was a deep conference back then. And Big Ten basketball used to be top tier. Like it was them and ACC, and they're still, like you said, they're not bad at all, but it's not what it was back in those days. But no, you're right. The SEC for women's basketball this year is crazy. You're looking at, like, I'm looking right now at the top 25. You have South Carolina at number 1, Lady Vols number 5. You have to scroll down a little bit, but you get to mention Kim Mulkey, LSU number 12. Like they have been really impressive to me this year. And that, of course, Tennessee fan luck. Like LSU's good in both men's and women's basketball, so you don't know that. Tennessee fans, regardless of which basketball team you're rooting for, like you're not going to escape LSU this year. Luckily, Lady Vols only played them once, I think. Men's team hasn't played them twice. Then you get down to Georgia at 17, and then you have Kentucky at 19, and then you have Missouri receiving votes. And again, but that's like what, 6 teams or so I just mentioned there. That doesn't even mention like the teams that are in the bottom half of the conference that are still able to get off and pull off upsets against you. Look at, again, Ole Miss is a solid team. Arkansas is a solid team. Like those teams aren't ranked, aren't receiving votes. Texas A&M, again, they were a top 25 team. Those are 3 teams right there. Lady Vols have played that I think can pull off some upsets and can be the teams that you don't want to face. That Arkansas team was a tough contest for Lady Vols, and A&M, I think, hopefully for their sake, will get better. I don't know that I think Lady Vols were just dominant in that game for one reason, but I hope they can get a little better, because I'd like for their coach to be able to go out more on a high note than what currently is not having a great run right now. But I mean, this conference is so deep, and that's why I'm very hesitant to say that the Lady Vols won't have another loss before they play UConn. But the Lady Vols are just playing so well. But it does concern me when you had to play Arkansas again. Again, it's at home, so that's definitely going to help. But I want to go back really quickly here to Lady Vols stuff, Cora, and go back to a story we talked about earlier that you had written about the NIL deal with Lady Vols. Just I guess let our listeners here, or viewers or whatever, let them know about that piece, because I've only had a chance to read a little bit of it. I didn't get a chance to actually sit down and read the entire article. Unfortunately, I'll do that after we get off here, but let our listeners know about it, because I think it's, to me, NIL for the women's game, there's been a pretty decent focus on it, but it's been almost, from what I've seen nationally, like exclusively about UConn players, just because UConn's, they're the prime team right now in women's basketball. And the Lady Vols haven't gotten, the national attention for NIL stuff because they haven't got the big national NIL deals. But I think it's important to talk about the NIL in regards to women's athletics, because I think it can be a huge game changer for women's athletics, because I think that, to me, Lady Vols are marketable, man. Like, especially they keep consistently doing what they're doing now and staying in the top 10 and top 5. You're going to see this Lady Vol brand and just how marketable it is across the country. Going back to what we talked about earlier with your piece, like the shipping that you have all across the country, even all across the world, for Lady Vol fans. Like this brand, that Lady Vol script and the Power T is an extremely marketable program, a marketable brand.
Yeah, Tamari Key and Jordan Horston have an NIL deal with Orange Mountain Designs, which was opened by Terry Holder in 2008. When Pat Summitt saw her t-shirt designs for, it was Holly Warlick and Nikki Fargas's Cruising for a Cause motorcycle rides for breast cancer. And she was like, well, can you do this for Lady Vols and promote, the Lady Vols logo? Because, that was really important to Pat to promote her team and her and the women of Tennessee. So she did it, been thriving ever since, selling exclusively Lady Vol gear, which is very impressive. With everything that's gone on the last 10 years, it stay open that long. Really sweet lady. She's always around the program. She'll go to practices. She is very much like an extension of the program itself. So she's awesome. But it was awesome to see that, Tamari and Jordan are getting this opportunity, and, they have awesome t-shirts. I think they're pretty cool. It's nice that they kind of like fit with their personalities, and, they get a say in it and stuff. And obviously proceeds from the t-shirts, but it's definitely about a lot more than that for them, just because like it's not like they're trying to get rich off of this. It's like, it's an opportunity to talk about, building relationships. It's an opportunity to possibly coach their own camps, which, Jordan Horston was really excited about, which is, something I never thought about. But, with NIL, there's so many possibilities to use your name and your likeness to build a brand, to, make some money. But the other thing that we talked about was kind of the disparity in these like blockbuster big NIL deals. Most of them in women's basketball have been with white players, which was pretty predictable if you're paying attention. And I actually got to talk to a Tennessee professor named Guy Harrison, great guy. He's researches gender and race in sports media, gave some really good insight onto, just the history of Black women in sports and how they have not been marketed. And it's a cycle of media coverage. It's a cycle of, well, you're catering to a niche audience. It's a cycle that just doesn't stop. And so for me, it was really important to talk to the players about that. How do you feel about this? As a Black athlete and you have this brand now, you have this deal, like, what do you want to use it for? So that was really awesome to be able to give them a platform to talk about that and to shed some light on kind of what I've seen. And I did a bunch of research trying to find deals for like Ryan Howard, for Nalissa Smith, for these draft picks. And they're just not these big deals. And if they are, they've somehow flown under the radar of like all media coverage, which is also another part of the cycle. So, there's just a lot to it. And so like, if you have time, it would really mean a lot to me. And I'm sure the players, if you go read that, it's on knoxnews.com. and should be on the women's basketball landing page still.
Yeah, and in fact, if you go to, I was looking at on Cora's Twitter account, she is at Cora Hall with 3 L's. It's her pinned tweet on there as well. So that's a really good point. It's not just about marketing the women athletes, but marketing the Black women athletes and just the people of color in sports in general for the women's side of it. Because like you said, that's a very good point about the way the cycle has been with the catering to specific markets and whatnot, and how that's got to change. Because it's not a big problem in football necessarily, but I think you make a really good point. Because I think, looking at the Lady Vols specifically with Tennessee, like your biggest known player, obviously Pat Summitt's the biggest known name, but aside from Pat, it's Candace Parker. I think it's awesome that you have a player, a person of color who is your biggest name and is continuing to be, probably the biggest name right now in the WNBA, honestly, because obviously winning the title this year, but just what she does outside of the sport too, with being on TNT, with doing a lot of stuff that she's done outside of basketball in general. Like, she's just this big name that, people know her regardless of if you even watch women's basketball, who Candace Parker is. So she transcends basketball. So I think it's really cool for that. And I think it's just awesome that Tennessee in general just has had like 2 or 3 of the biggest athletes you can think of in the past 2 decades of sports, because you've had Candace Parker with Lady Vols, you've had Peyton Manning with football. It's just, I don't know. It's cool. It's cool to me to see that you had that brand recognition for Tennessee, even though it's been a little bit since both those players play at Tennessee, but it's still cool nonetheless. But Cora, you've been fantastic to have on here once again. I really appreciate every time you've come on to do a Lady Vol podcast. I always appreciate your insights and into the team and just your thoughts in general about college basketball. I already mentioned your Twitter, but obviously clearly you can plug it again and plug any other piece you have out, the NIL one. I also saw you had written one. I didn't actually notice this until just now. You actually had written one using that quote from Pat Summitt about the offense selling tickets, but the defense winning championships. So plug that one, plug anything else you have on Knox News and anything else on your social you want to.
Yeah, I got a couple stories from Sunday, and one of them was kind of like just an instant, recap of the game. And then the second, I kind of focused in on that phrase of offense sells tickets, defense wins games, and rebounding wins championships, because I feel like I've heard it a lot lately. And it's everywhere. But I really feel like Kelly's team has embraced that, and the offense was the last piece they were trying to figure out. So I really felt like through the first 4 SEC games, they put that together. So now they're hitting all 3 of those. And it's a great, I think I mentioned that quote specifically in the press conference when Jordan Horston was on, and she was like, that's what we're trying to do. And I was like, so it's obviously talked about. It's a big piece of that program. So that's kind of what I did Sunday. Also, we mentioned Jordan Walker kind of flies under the radar sometimes, but she had 1,000 points against Texas A&M. I did a little feature on her and, the impact she has on the team. So, lots of exciting stuff happening with this team, and I appreciate everyone who has been reading and following along. It's been such a fun season so far, and I just couldn't be happier to be here.
Well, it's nice to have you again on the podcast. It's nice to have you in coverage for the Lady Vols, and I know a lot of Lady Vol fans out there appreciate it because it's been. I think it's. I don't know. Last time there was just a dedicated Lady Vol coverage for Knox News, so it's really nice. I know for me personally to see that we've gotten a couple of comments on our YouTube channel already. That's just YouTube, but we've only had YouTube for like a month now, but also definitely on social media. But a couple on YouTube recently saying that, hey, I live over here. I'm just happy to get any Lady Vol coverage I can and appreciate you guys doing it. So Cora, you're appreciated. I know Maria's definitely appreciated at 2R7. I've had Kellyanne Stitz of WATE on here as well. Lady Vol coverage, I know, is just appreciated. I'm very happy to, do that here and bring it here to Vol basketball fever. Well, you do both men's and women's, but clearly I think Lady Vols deserve more coverage than they get nationally. So I'm here I'm not national. I'm just here in Knoxville, but I like to do what I can and help talk about them. But again, thank you so much, Cora. Thank you to all of you who are listening or watching along wherever you are. Subscribe to your YouTube channel, like this video if you're watching it. If you're listening to just the audio, thank you so much again for that too. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, you name it, we're there. Thank you all so much. Share this with a friend, share with your family, share with a Lady Vol fan, a Tennessee fan, or someone who just likes college basketball and women's basketball. I'm sure they will also enjoy it. But signing off for Cora, I'm Nathanael, and this has been another episode of the Lady Vol Basketball Fever Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Vol Basketball Fever Podcast. Subscribe to the show so you'll never miss another episode.